I got it. Perfect. So this is the Nagog Hill Orchard ad hoc working group meeting for February 9th. Our meeting this evening will follow sort of the normal course. We're going to recap what we discussed at the last meeting. We're going to have group member updates. We're going to talk about, we're going to get an update on the pruning of the orchard. We will have a review and a discussion about the RFP, review the action item calendar, talk about next steps, and improve our meeting minutes from our last meeting. So we did not meet last week just because I had sat down with town council and gone over with Jenny, Joe, Layden, and I did the RFP to date. And we also talked about some language in the lease and just little nuggets that we might want to add in there. So based upon our discussion with her, we just felt that there wasn't really a lot to talk about at the last meeting because we wanted to tweak the RFP a little bit more. I have not heard back from Jenny from last week, so I don't have any update to share with her, but we will go over the RFP and the lease language a little bit later in this meeting. I know that Joe has moved forward with the RFP on the pruning, and that he'll have an update for us on that. So if you want to just maybe start with that, Joe.
Sure. So at the last meeting had identified and distributed to everyone basically the bid results, which then identified out of the 4 responses what the order as far as lowest to highest was. Did end up checking references and also reached out to Jonathan Clement with UMass just to actually check to see if he was aware of their work. And he was, he said, while he hadn't overseen any of the work, he's familiar with the orchards that then they had done work on and think that they do a good job and would do a good job for us. So they actually started on Monday, probably some initial, but today met up with them, and they're like covered with sawdust. I mean, they're out there. They said they've had quite a few residents stop by just to ask what was going on, and overall feedback was that people were glad something was being done. So they should be out there another 2.5 weeks. My hope is tomorrow they can just give me a little bit of a pruning lesson. I'm not saying that I'm going to pick up a chainsaw and stuff, but it's always good to learn a little bit more, especially if people have questions, call the office and try to get a better understanding as far as what's going on.
All right, excellent. Thank you. So any other member updates? Jen, do you have anything to share?
Nope, I've been reading the Land for Good, which Amy had mentioned a while back, which is a pretty long document, but it goes into an awful lot of detail about wording, and the new RFP, or I shouldn't say the reworded RFP reflects some of the language that's in this document. It just makes it a little bit easier to read. It makes it a little smoother, makes it more welcoming, but it's a really good document, and it kind of gets you in the spot of being the lessee, and if you're the lessee, what are you looking for? So those are things that a good chunk of them we have addressed in the RFP. So that was it. So Amy, thanks for bringing it forward again. And if you guys all get a chance at some point to read through it, it's long, but it's good.
Yeah.
It's good. So that's all I have.
No, I agree with you, Jen. That is a great document. I shared it with town council as well after I mentioned it to her and sent it to her. So she was going to look through it. She was interested in looking at it as well. So thanks, Amy, for sharing that with everybody. Do you have anything to share, Amy, with the group?
Yeah, so as we discussed at the previous meeting, I did reach out to Land for Good to see if they would sort of review the RFP for us and sort of advise on it, or maybe advise the Board of Selectmen, and they said that they would be interested in supporting us in a pro bono way. And so when we're ready, we can just sort of like reach out to them.
Okay.
So I don't know if like they sort of say we'll do X number of hours pro bono, and then after that we start charging. I didn't get into that level of detail, but they are willing to do a little bit of work for us for free.
That was
Okay.
Jay Silverman, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so both of us reached out to him, and they were very, very accommodating. Just, this was a tough month. They had other things on the burner, but once we had the language finalized, they would be happy to take a look. So that's another great resource.
Okay. All right, great. Paul, do you have anything to share?
No, are you able to hear me? I'm actually driving now.
We can hear you.
Can you hear me?
We
No,
can.
you can't. All right, hold on.
Yeah, we hear you.
No, we
You
can hear
can't?
you.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm able to listen and I'm about to park, but I have nothing to add. Nope.
Okay, great. Thank you. Will, do you have anything you wanted to share with the group?
I don't at this time, thanks.
All right, good, excellent. All right, good. So I don't have anything to share other than what I'm going to share when we talk about the RFP and the lease. So I did, like I mentioned, went through the document, the Land for Good document, which was a great resource, and did pull some things from that to share with the group. With respect to the RFP, did everybody get a chance to look at the RFP individually? Did anyone have any suggested changes to the last version that I shared? Okay. All right, so maybe we don't need to talk about the actual RFP if people don't have any comments on it, but I can maybe share with the group the lease. I'm going to call them nuggets that I pulled out from the Land for Good document. If you want to do that, how does that sound?
Sounds good.
All right, so let me see if I can share my screen. And okay, can you see this?
Yep.
Everybody? All right, good. So these paragraphs here are some nuggets that I pulled out of the Land for Good document for and I shared these with town council as well. So first off is permitted uses of the property, just maybe letting any prospective tenant know that we might allow events at the property if legally permissible. That might require permits from the select board. And the other thing too to discuss with the select board is any public events. Do we want to add a line item budget for that type of use by the lessee? For example, the Shade Tree Committee, we provide funding every year. It's about $3,000. We just put it in the budget for them in case they actually have a plan that they have put together to replace trees throughout the town. So we provide them with a budget because we appoint them through the select board. So this is just something that I was going to mention to the select board. Do we want to maybe budget if we're going to require public access or public events X amount of time per year? Is it something that we want to provide some funding for to the lessee? So that was one section.
I think it's a good idea. Like if the schools want to start to engage the apple orchard, or Park and Rec want to engage the apple orchard, if
Right.
they need to pay for educator time or some sort of just sort of like artsy craftsy things, if there's things they just need to buy to run a program.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Okay, great. So the next paragraph, restrictions on farm practices, just because it is for agricultural use. Do we want to put restrictions on what that means? And I put in example pigs, like, there's a lot that could be done with that land. Are there any restrictions that we want to maybe discuss or consider for the property, for the land?
I think it's tough where we say, well, prohibit the creation of roads or farm ponds. Isn't that already covered by ag? By the ag restriction? I don't
Right,
know.
and so this is something so I just pulled these out of the Land for Good document, so it's something that I thought would be of interest to talk to the group about. So I don't know if that's something that we should consider or not consider. Does anyone have thoughts on that?
Yeah,
Aren't these items that if we don't cover them in the RFP, they can be later on addressed in the
lease?
actual lease if we.
Yeah, oh, absolutely, Paul. So,
Yeah.
but it's just something I just wanted to talk to the group about to see if they had any thoughts on this either way.
Yeah.
I mean, the only restrictions I would put in place are anything that might really upset abutters. You know, there's not a lot of space for ranching.
Right.
I don't know, Will, what do you think? I don't think you can get like huge amount of animals in there. I don't know. It's like
It was just
I
something
think-
that came to mind.
I think it depends how the animals are managed. A pasturing type of a situation where it's not a high density number of animals in a particular area. Also, I think going along with what Paul said, it'd be interesting to see what we get for responses, and then what
And
would
then work
go.
it out through that process, Will.
Yeah, I guess I'd be hesitant to try and restrict things because you already have locally the right to farm bylaw,
Right.
then state and regular regulations. I'd be hesitant to add that in right up front.
Okay, so we'll take
Also,
out this.
on number one that occurred to me was, I would think that I would consider taking it out. And on number one, I was wondering about the budget line items as far as like a police detail, if there was need for that for parking on a busy weekend, that they could get assistance with that.
Right.
There's not a ton of parking up there, and it could get a little bit congested where it would be just as a possibility, a needed expense. That's all.
Okay, that's a good point. Okay. So, yeah, public event programming. Okay, so that would fall into that if the select board does agree to give them incorporate some sort of line item in the budget. Certainly that type of expense that money could be used for that type of cost. So that's a really good point to bring up. So do we want to take number 2 out?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. And then this paragraph I thought was interesting. Just as far as rights to sand, gravel, and clay. There was an issue with rocks from the stone walls being sold. I saw them online. Jen saw them online.
Yeah.
So that's why I put this language in there.
Is it something that was recently advertised, or was it just?
Not recently, Joe.
Okay.
Like probably last year.
Yeah, it was interesting. I'd have to look it up. I printed the page from the site, but there was probably 10 or 15 different locations in Massachusetts where you could buy something made with stone from a particular property. And I was under the impression too that stone walls are historical and they cannot be altered. So that was a surprise.
If it's a scenic road, but now that you say that, I think I remember seeing like hot plates and saying like from stones that okay. No, because when I was the town planner in Weston, we'd have a lot of projects. We're gonna incorporate stone walls, and then they basically just described it as we're harvesting stone walls from Central Mass. I just wanted to make sure it wasn't that's what wasn't going on. But no, that's our property.
I think the restriction is mainly along stone walls that are on boundaries. I'm not sure about stone walls. If you had a hedgerow that was in the middle of a property, that's, you know, I'm in agreement that if we're leasing the property, they shouldn't be, you know, maybe selling the stone walls, but I don't think it's a problem as long as it's not a boundary, not positive.
Okay. So do you want to leave that in there, Will, or do you want to specify boundary walls?
No, I would leave it in.
Okay.
I just found it. It was called American Stonecraft. They're out of Lowell. And they had some product at the Boston Public Market.
Wow.
But yeah. Anyway.
Okay. Number 3, lessee shall at no time allow any permits, any permit should not allow or permit any liens, including but not limited to builders' liens, to arise against the leased land on account of any work, labor, services, or material supplied to or on behalf of the lessee. So that was just standard legal language.
Do we need to have that in there?
I don't know. So we can ask town council about that.
I think that's fairly standard. I mean, that way they can't leverage as assets anything to do with the farm. And then if they don't pay and they're leasing equipment or purchasing, they could come after us. So it basically is just we can't be subject to any liens that they may arise at.
Okay.
Some of this looks like some standard language also that town council had in the last one.
Right. Okay. So yeah, it could be overlapping.
Okay.
And then this other one, as far as this is number 4, definitely, I think is important. Shall not, at no time shall allow any seizable labor licenses, insurance, or other business licenses to lapse. And town council may wordsmith that a little bit differently, but I just thought that was important to have in there. Does anyone have any thoughts on that?
What could we put as an example where you have the lessee at no time shall allow any seasonal labor licenses, insurance, or other business licenses? What would be an example of a business license? Is there something we could...
Applicator's license.
Okay, so if we could maybe put that in parentheses or something as an example, or is that opening a can of worms?
I'll wait. Well, let's wait and see what council thinks on that. I don't know. I'd like to leave it broad, personally.
Okay.
Yeah.
Business licenses could encompass many different things, but we'll see what Jenny comes back with on that paragraph. Like I said, I suspect she's going to wordsmith it.
Okay.
And then this, the town, including its employees, agents, and representatives, shall be permitted to enter upon the leased land at any time for purposes of inspecting the land within 48 hours notice by writing or email, by writing an email or text message.
That
So-
seems fair. 48 hours.
Okay. This language, paragraph 6, town council's working on as far as repairs, maintenance, and upkeep of the buildings on the property. So that language I just wanted to share with the group, but we're trying to work through exactly what that language will be and how that part of the lease agreement will be structured. So that's a work in progress. And that goes for paragraph 2 as well. And this was something that was really interesting in that Land for Good document, because they really talked about what are just normal repairs every day. work that you might expect to be performed on the property just to keep it in good condition, and what constitutes really what along the lines of like a capital improvement, and how to differentiate between the two, and, you know, figure out who's going to be responsible for what, because we do need to keep in mind procurement laws with respect to major repairs over a certain threshold. So that's something that town council is going to be working through that language as well, to see exactly how that arrangement or that agreement should be structured between the town and the lessee, and what exactly will differentiate between normal wear and tear and, you know, major repairs. And this is an arbitration clause. This is standard legal language, which town council will be reviewing and considering if we should include that in the lease agreement as well. And then this is just all legal jumbo. No amendment or change or modification shall be valid unless in writing and signed by both parties, blah, blah, blah. And then this is, I thought was important too, and this is something that will have to be worked out with the select board, is really having a primary point of contact between the lessee and the town. Just to make sure that we keep the line of communication open between the town and the lessee, but also just making it somebody's responsibility to really keep an eye on things there and make sure that certain thresholds are met so things don't fall through the cracks. So the structure of, you know, paragraph 10 is again something that the select board will have to refine that, but I personally think it's a good idea to really spell that out, how we expect communication to go back and forth between the lessee and the town. Joe, do you have any thoughts on that?
No, I think it's a good point, because it always, you know, ultimately comes back to the select board, but we need a point of contact that then builds it into work programs, and, you know, makes it clear that there's going to be some oversight, and you know, so I think that's good to have something like that. Right.
And then this is just accepting the leased lands as is and where is, on a as is and whereas basis, and any alterations and improvements made, erected, and installed during the term with the town's prior written approval shall be at the risk, cost, and expense of the lessee to the entire satisfaction of the town. I don't know how Jenny's going to feel about that one, now that I'm reading through it. So we'll see what she comes back with on that. And the other thing too to discuss with the group, Joe and I did have a conversation with town council about the condition of the home presently, and it's her recommendation that we omit that the residential home from the RFP at this time. And it's something I need to talk to the select board about when we bring this before them. Just because of the condition of the premises, she feels is not suitable for somebody to rent at this time. And she feels it's a better approach if we get that property up to par, to where it should be, make sure that all the heating systems are working, the plumbing's working, you know, any painting needs to be done, carpet. We don't know if it needs a new roof. So we're looking at talking to the select board about issuing, what are we going to call it, Joe? A feasibility study? Yeah, just to assess the condition of the home once Charles does vacate the property, and really get a determination of what work needs to be done on the home prior to offering it to somebody as a residence. And the other thing too is through the RFP process, we might get somebody that doesn't want the home. But if during those negotiations and those conversations, we can let them know if they are interested in the home that we are planning to make it available, but we just want to make sure it's in proper condition before somebody moves in there.
Can we sort of change the wording to say at present time it's not available, but it's not, I don't know how you say it properly, it's not off the table, but right now it is. But I think that was one of the biggest points that came up in speaking with some of these groups, is if there is housing available, it's a big plus for us.
Right,
So if we say not at the moment, but we hope to be able to have something, later on. I'm nervous of saying the residential home is also excluded, because that's a
Right.
pretty final statement, and that may just turn some people off and not even give us a chance. So as
Right.
long as we can word it that it's kind of open for discussion, and if we get that far with somebody, we can possibly say, well, you know what, maybe by June or by July. I just don't want it to sound so final that it's not available, but not
Right.
at this
So-
time.
right. So Jen, this is for the lease agreement. So this language will change during the negotiations through the lease, how that's worded. But in the RFP, it does state that at this time. And I can show you that paragraph in the actual RFP document, but this is basically a placeholder for language in the lease with respect to the house.
Okay,
Does that make sense?
yep.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, I think everything's on a great track. I agree with everything you're saying, but I've got to dive for another meeting. So,
Okay, thanks, Paul.
yeah, bye-bye.
Bye. And then this is just the sample lease agreement. And again, this is a sample. And town council's going through this just to change some of the language. She's looking at the recommendations that we just went through as a group. And she's going to refine this document based on the recommendations that we just reviewed, and just to firm up certain areas about it. Like the whole rent portion of the document is going to need to be discussed. And we got to figure out what that structure is going to be like. And so, yeah, so that's it. So that's where we're at on the lease agreement. I think the RFP is in good shape. Do we want to send the RFP over to Land for Good and just have them say to them, just take a quick look at it? Maybe not more than I don't know if it would take them more than an hour or two to go through it. I think it's in good shape.
I think that sounds like a good idea. The only thing I was going to add, and maybe this is taken care in the final lease, but I don't think we should allow them to sublet the property or sections of the property. Maybe
Right.
that's just somewhere else.
I think
Yeah, there you go.
assignment and subletting. Yeah, shall not encumber, assign, or otherwise transfer this lease. And management of the lease, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, we put in there that they can't do that, didn't we?
Yeah, number
Yes.
B. It's on B. The lessee shall not sublet in whole or any portion of the
Yeah,
property.
so that's in there, Amy. And again, this is a sample lease, so we'll see, once we do get responses to the RFP and see who comes before us. That might be something to be reconsidered under certain circumstances, but as of right now, it's worded this way. Did
So in
anyone
terms-
else? Go
So
ahead.
just in terms of going forward, do you want me to send you Jay Silverman's email address at Land for Good, and you can, or the town or Joe can send the RFP over, and that's at your level kind of conversation, or
Sure.
does that make sense?
How does that sound, Joe?
That sounds fine. I was
Okay.
going to say that if Amy had it, she can just CC me on it and say, hey, if you have comments, please make sure that you also send it to Joe. So either way, I can either do it or just copy me.
Yeah, because I probably don't have the most up-to-date copy of the RFP. I don't even think I to hand.
Okay. I
So
mean, I can do it too, Joe, if you want,
Okay.
and then why don't I do it, and then I'll just copy email. I'll
Yeah.
copy you and I'll copy Amy. That's fine. Amy, if you can
Yeah.
send me that email address, that's fine. All right, good. So this is just the rest of the lease. So did anyone else have any comments on any of that, the RFP or the lease agreement at this point?
I was wondering, it might not be maybe up to this group, but it had occurred to me that having a minimum base rate on the rent that's consistent with the 61A tax value of the property would kind of keep it in parity with the other farms that are local. That may help kind of acceptance into the agricultural community part of things, where everybody keep the playing field somewhat level. That it would be somewhere, I think, in that be around $700 a month. And that would, probably be something that would not be collected until they have proceeds from the produce that they grow over the growing season or something. So it would be a delayed type of a thing. That was just something that came into mind.
I love that suggestion, Will. Because that's something that we actually talked about with town council. She feels strongly that we do need to charge some sort of rent as opposed to an in-kind relationship. So how exactly would that be computed? So you're saying $700?
The 61A tax valuations on the per acre, or however the assessors assign.
Okay,
Sorry.
that's all right.
However the assessors are assign the tax valuations on the 61A properties.
Okay,
The other thing was that if it was more than that, initially, it could be used as a way of incentivizing the replanting of the orchard, that if they planted X number of trees or what have you, that they could, get kind of a rebate on the rent to encourage the,
growth.
renewal of the orchard, so that it was in good faith on the town's part to encourage the renewal of the orchard and replacement of the trees, but also, because of the look back, the investment that they're making on a long-term thing, that they would be encouraged to keep replanting the trees, replacing the trees as they needed to be.
Okay,
Good
and
idea.
that would just pertain to the fields where the orchard trees are located. Because I anticipate we might get somebody in that they might use the land for other purposes, as long as they fall within the agricultural definition.
Right, just because the trees, I mean, a crop of corn is 90 to 110 days, but apple trees are that, somewhere along, I would think 5 to 7 years before you've recouped the investment of replanting them. And where we're trying to look out longer term, just using some part of the rental agreement as a way of incentivizing it.
Okay,
It's a good idea.
I do. I like that idea a lot. That's and I like the thought process behind it. It's not just a random number.
Yeah, it's like tethered to something. It's like benchmarked.
Yeah, that's a really great idea. Okay. All right, so I'll look into that with the assessor's office and talk to town council about it too, and the select board. We can make that proposal to them. Were there any other comments about that? Okay, so action items going forward. I know we have the pruning underway now. Hopefully we can get the RFP to the select board by the end of this month. I think we're in really good shape, and there's a strong possibility of that, which would be wonderful. But I want to take it one step further and start thinking about any maintenance that we're going to need to do on the land in the spring, because it's going to be here before we know it, as far as spraying, removing clippings, just to clean up the property. I want to plan for that, as opposed to just assuming that we're going to have a new tenant in there at that time. So I just didn't know if we have any idea what that timeline looks like as far as spraying and things go. Like, when is that supposed to be done?
I mean, what I had heard was that we were looking at April for end of April for the first application, and then it ends up being on a weekly basis through May. But that's now going to be the next stage, lining those up. Now that we have the pruner, I'll be working on trying to get a better understanding of that. Also, I'm going to be talking to DPW as far as their ability to do some of the chipping and removal of the branches that are being taken down from the trees. Because if we're not able to take care of that, then I have to procure that separately as well.
Okay.
Because without that stuff out, we can't get the sprayers down between the trees.
Right.
So
Yeah, and then mowing as well, right?
Mowing, at least, we have the equipment, but that's something that we just may not have the man hours for it.
Right.
So those things are now where I'm pivoting to try to line up and get a better understanding of what we can do on our level and what we have to then basically bid out.
Okay. Yeah, I think it would be good if we did get a handle on that now.
And Joe, I'm sorry, who's pruning the apple orchard now?
So his name is Kent Haskell. They do
from
Show Farms.
Farms.
They do a whole bunch around the area.
They throw a cat between the branches. Yeah. Do they know of anyone who can come in and do the spraying? Like, can they give recommendations? Because I'm sure that's not like a.
Joe, Pat Kay offered too. He's kind of standing in the wings, and he said, when you guys get to that point, reach out to me, and if I can't do it, I can suggest it to somebody else.
Yeah, and that's where John Clements also offered assistance as far as coming up with timelines and what needs to be done. So, I think it's then hitting these people for round 2 of recommendations and guidance as we continue to learn how to manage that apple orchard.
Farmers. You might want to reach out to Pat Kay and just get like an estimate on how much that's going to cost before you go to the Board of Selectmen and ask for money.
Oh, yeah.
That's going to be a lot of money.
Yes, I had that conversation with John Clement, and he gave me sort of an estimate. I think even when I walked it with Pat, I think he was saying the same thing. I'm just forgetting what the dollar amount was basically on a per acre basis. I think he said something like $2,000 an acre. So, we're up there.
Okay. All right, that'll be good if we can get that together. That'll be helpful. All right, good. Is there any? And I'll plug those into the action item calendars, Joe, when we get that together.
Okay. Yep.
And then next steps, we're going to send the RFP over to Land for Good and just get them to take a look at it. We'll get town council's comments back. I'll follow up with her and just let her know that what our time frame is. And then maybe once we get Land for Good's comments back, town council's comments back, we'll go through everything again. And then I'll put together, I will reach out to the assessor, Will, based on your suggestion, and see what formula we can come up with. I think that's a great suggestion. And we can use that separately to present that during discussions with the select board. So are there anything else to talk about tonight?
No, I just wanted to say, so Amy, both you and I reached out to Jay Silverman, so we shouldn't both reach back out to him. So do you want to?
Yeah, I'll do that. I don't mind.
Okay.
I have tons of extra free time. Totally kidding. I don't. It's fine. Like 2 seconds.
Okay, good. Do we have meeting minutes, Joe?
No, Amy had done a great job doing 2 of the ones that identified on the agenda. When I took a look, there was just some changes that I wanted to do. I never had a chance to send it out to the group with enough time for you guys to review it. So I'll send that out so that we can give it to you with enough time to review for the next meeting.
Okay, good. All right, great. So do we want to, we'll just keep on our regular schedule here and keep moving forward and meet again next week? hopefully with a more updated version or comments on the RFP. So
Is next week 6 or 7 p.m.?
can we go
Yeah,
back
and
to 6? Joe?
all up to you when I cut and copied the agenda from last time. It wasn't until the next morning that I'm like, oh crap, it was 7. So it's fine on my end. It's really all of you.
I may have a conflict with a TDR working group at, I think it's 6. I don't know if earlier is possible.
The earliest I could do, just because of work, is I could do 5:30.
I'm not home till 6, Monday through Friday.
Are those meetings, is that just, are those going to be every Wednesday, Will?
I think they're trying bi-weekly. It just would be,
So,
because we're not meeting this week, so we're meeting next week.
okay.
I don't know if I don't know, the agenda isn't out yet, so I don't know what they're discussing. And which meeting would be priority.
Now, so do you want to keep it for 7 next week, or is that even going to be enough time for you with that group? With that, because you don't know yet.
I would think an hour would be adequate, and it would be wrapping up anyways.
Okay. Does anyone have any
I
objection
know
to
it's
just keeping?
inconvenient, but
Yeah, 7 o'clock is much easier for me.
It is?
I'm like
Okay.
half driving my kid home from Market Basket from his job, half cooking dinner, half eating dinner, and then trying to look totally cool as a cucumber on this Zoom call. So 7 is better.
All right, then that's fine with me. Jen, does that work for you?
That's fine, sure.
Okay. All right, so we'll plan on 7. We'll keep it at 7. All right, good. So our next meeting will be, what is that, the 16th? 16th at 7 p.m. All right, great. So Amy, you're going to send me over that email address?
Yes, I will.
All right, good. All right, excellent. So that concludes our meeting for this evening. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second. All those in favor, Will?
aye.
Amy?
Aye.
Jen?
Aye.
And Cindy is aye. That concludes our meeting, and we will be back next week at 7 p.m.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
See y'all. Bye-bye.
Bye.